Um, well, in the interest of everybody's time, let me call the meeting to order. I think you all got a couple of versions of the meeting minutes from our April 26th session.
Before you could go too much farther, you need to do a roll call so it's clear who's here.
Okay. You start, Carol.
All right, for charter review members, Michael Falcarelli,
Here.
Michelle Stecker,
Here.
Ed Bowen,
Here.
Jack Hare,
Here.
Phil Crawford,
Here.
Chuck Barrand,
Here.
and I can see that Monica Hopton is signing on. Her audio is not 100% yet. So I'll let the record show that she is signing on and she will be here. In addition, you have the town clerk, myself, Carol Wardell, you have the council president, Bob Mushin, and you have the town administrator, Antonio Texera. And today happens to be May 24th. All yours, Jack.
Okay. Welcome, Monica, and welcome.
Hi, sorry. Thank you.
All right. Welcome, Bob and Tony and Carol in your official capacity here. We were just going to refer to the minutes of April 26th. I presume everybody's had a chance to read them. Can I have a motion to approve?
I'll move that we approve the minutes as presented to us by Carol's version of the minutes.
I second. This is Michelle.
All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, we either need to do a roll call or we need to call out if anyone is opposed.
Any opposed?
Okay, so we'll state that it was unanimous.
Okay. So the next item up was to have a little more specificity on subsequent meetings and how we're going to get through, meeting with the other members of the town council, the key departments and department heads. And then there's some 20 plus other groups, commissions, committees that do good work for the town. And I had sent out a note suggesting a strategy of making sure we cover them off, cover really everybody off, but sort of prioritize the major departments, the major budget holders. It was taking a bit of a lead from a note, a memo that Bob Mushin sent out in November of 2020, where he was asking the town council liaison, the key town departments, to take a look at the charter review and to come up with any suggested areas for review. Thought that might be a good way of starting, and then with your approval, we'd work on a note that we would send to basically all of the commissions and committees and groups in the town, just asking them if there are areas in the charter that either relevant to their specific area, be it the beach or the public library or whatever it might be, that they, if they have, suggestions that they would like us to take up, that we would ask them to email the Charter Review Commission at Little Compton RI, and then we would take a look at it and invite them to join us to, to share their suggestions if need be. There are so many, we don't have that much time when you figure out how we're, kind of going to get through this and make sure that we hear from anybody that would like to tee up a possible area for review. So that was just a suggested approach. I'd ask the committee members if they think that makes sense, or if they have any suggestions of any other areas or a possible better way of going at it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I thought also it was a very good idea. Methodical and giving everyone a chance to make any suggestions that they would like. I thought it was good.
Ed, I'm not sure if you said anything there. Do you?
I absolutely agree, Jack. I think part of the beauty of this organization is that should at some future point we decide that we need to make changes, we can. And I would urge you as the chair to impose whatever sort of structure it is that you'd like as far as developing a format for how we proceed through this. I think that we don't have any bylaws. So I think having elected you as chair, my vote for you as chair was my vote for you to kind of impose your will on this committee in as many ways as you see fit. But if you wish to delegate every decision to us and to a majority kind of consensus, then that's fine too. I think that that's your choice as chair.
Great. Any other concerns or suggestions, considerations? If not,
No.
I
I think it's pretty straightforward. It's
Yeah.
very open. I think it's very straightforward. It's not confusing, and I think it's a very good format.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if going forward, if there are sometimes tasks to be done, if those will be delegated to one of us, or I don't really know how this process works, but
I think there'll definitely be tasks, and we'll get through this. And I don't want to keep Bob and Tony and Carol, but I think the lineup I had suggested was, Paul Golombeski, the town council liaison, the police chief at the next meeting, and Anya Wallach, the financial functions on July 19th, going down the line. I thought we'd send out an invitation to all of the, the heads, the committee chairs of the various committees. And as they raise their hand, we would kind of filter them into subsequent meetings, and we'll do that in a public way so everybody knows what's up. And I'll send that with your approval out this week to all of those people, and again asking them to respond to the charter review at littlecompton.rhode-island.org. And
I think
Michelle,
that's a great idea. Are we grouping people together?
we certainly can. Yeah, it wouldn't be one. It wouldn't be one department for each meeting. We don't have the time, so there would possibly be 2 or 3 functions or groups together at a certain meeting.
Yeah.
And to
Yes,
Michelle's
yes.
to Michelle's question, I think that as we go through this, and Bob and Carol have given us some thoughtful suggestions, which I'm going to ask them to just take us through, and then Tony as well, those suggestions. But I think one of the things we could all help each other with is, Michelle, you take, one of those things and do a draft of what presuming that this meets with, Carol's, okay, that one of us would do a first draft of these suggestions, the suggested review changes for that have come up, and we'd each take various items, and so we could really focus on them, ask whatever questions we need and do that. And then there'll be, a time, if you looked at the schedule, when we go through and have some review meetings. We give the town council plenty of time to take a look at these things and stay on the schedule that's been laid out for us.
Sounds good, Jack.
Okay, so with that, let's just move along. I'll send out a note to the other, commissions, et cetera, in town. But Bob, to give you some benefit for your august position, we'll let you go first. And we greatly appreciate you being here with us and the suggestions that you had put forward regarding reviewing the charter sections relative to compensation for elected officials and also for the preparation of the capital expenditure. I wonder if seems pretty straightforward, but it'd be great if you could just take us through your thoughts on these.
Sure. Thank you very much. And Carol, if you would like, between Carol's and my inputs, you have the sum of what I received from any of the other counselors. So this is, at least at this point, our input. But Carol, if you would, do you prefer to go first, or how do you feel?
No, I'm good. I'm here for the duration.
Okay. Okay. Mine are the two that you referenced, Jack. One is a sort of an obvious one. We need to correct, or we need to adjust the charter to reflect the fact that we now have a finance director, and that position needs to be identified. There's probably some conversation that goes around whether we need to remain with a tax collector and a town treasurer. We have to look at perhaps state law to see whether we need to retain that and describe it as being part of the duties of the finance director, but in the charter. But I would encourage you that we have an ordinance, and we'll modify the ordinance as well. And I would suggest that the charter not try to get into the bits and pieces of how it's organized, but rather to set the framework. So I wouldn't look to have great changes other than name changes. The other reality there is that the process of the town council recommending to the budget committee, and then the budget committee recommending to the clerk the value that she will insert in her budget request for a compensation amount for that office is somewhat cumbersome and may not reflect the best practice. I would just encourage the Charter Review Commission to take a look at what other people do for elected officials and see whether we might have a different practice we would adopt. And I defer to the administrator as well in that conversation. I don't know that we're doing it the best way right now. As I say, what happens is the council votes to recommend something to the budget committee. The budget committee then recommends to the clerk, based on that input, what the budget committee, think that she should put in her budget for her own salary. And then that's how we proceed. That may be fine. She's the only remaining person in that category with the absence now of a town treasurer. So just a look by the Charter Review Commission would be helpful in terms of looking at other people's charters and seeing whether there's another way to do that.
So Bob, and please, anyone else on our committee, feel free to ask. This, it'd be helpful if we reviewed this, be helpful if we looked at what how other towns in Rhode Island do this. Maybe you know that already, or is that?
I don't know it. It's rather easy for you to get access to all of the town charters.
Right.
And it is an effort that frankly I've just deferred until we had the next convening of the Charter Review Commission to do. But I think that it's a way that you could look at that offline. It doesn't really take a great deal of interaction with others unless you find somebody that you say, well, this is another way of doing it. Let's find out find out how they like it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um,
Any,
Go ahead.
any other questions of Bob on that point?
Yes, on this situation, if it reflects that we have no financial director now, what would be any bump in the road? I mean, it seems pretty straightforward.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The finance director is a hired position, so this no longer applies to the office that we used to call town treasurer.
I see.
The only office to which it applies is the town clerk. There is only one remaining elected official whose salary is subject to this kind of process. And I'm only suggesting, not because she's alone in this, but because it's just proven to be somewhat cumbersome, that we consider might there be another way of
Gotcha.
deciding
I
what
see.
the town clerk's recommended salary would be, including asking her. I mean, in other words, there's nothing that needs to be on the table or off the table for consideration. It's just that this is the way we have done it for a few cycles now. It seems to me to be focused now on a single person. Maybe there's a different way to do it. And it may end up that you say this way seems just fine, and this is the way we think you ought to continue, and therefore we don't have a recommendation. I understand that as well. It's just that I don't
Okay.
think anybody's taking a careful look at it.
Okay,
And I think
Thank
for
you.
clarity to those who may not understand, as an elected official, I am not allowed by law to set my own salary. So there has to be some other method by which my salary gets set before the voters at a town meeting.
Very
So
important.
this is the process we're doing
Yeah.
at the moment.
I
She
see.
is a department head of the town, and one aspect of her department proposal is denied to her. She may not recommend her own salary. So
Right.
somebody has to do it, kind of thing.
Yes, that makes sense.
Thank you.
Not just recommend, but approve too.
Well, the approval comes at
well,
financial town
The
meeting.
approval
Okay.
comes from the town. Right?
Okay.
The town approves the salary, but the question is, what is posed as the request, and what does the budget committee recommend? So there are those two steps, as with any other appropriation that happened before.
Yeah, got it.
The other one is the capital expenditure program. The process we've defined in the charter right now is, I would say, unwieldy in the sense that the budget committee, well, you'll see when you look at it, but the budget committee is charged with some initial responsibility. I would argue the initial responsibility ought to be that of the administrator. It was mine before we had an administrator, but you need to be an inside person, it seems to me, to say, here's the capital plan. Then the council looks at that, having had an opportunity prior to the capital plan being fully approved. The council looks at that and says, yes, this looks like the capital plan that we want to put forward. That then becomes the council's plan, which, like any other item of submittal, is reviewed by the budget committee. And they say, we looked at your capital plan and we think we have the following questions on that. So come on in here and tell us about it. That process, it would seem to me, is better than the budget committee being charged with the initial responsibility of developing a capital plan. The budget committee doesn't sit year round. It's not intimately familiar with the details. So section 502B3 and section 505 could be modified in that respect. And I would suggest that you look at that and see whether that's something you want to do.
Yeah, and certainly makes sense to me. Any questions of Bob on this?
So it's more of a three-step. The capital plan then goes to the council, which then becomes the council plan, then reviewed by the budget committee. Is that correct?
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
I see.
The council has the responsibility to submit to the budget committee a wide range of budget items, including the administrator's salary, for example. So many things fall under the council. One of them is the capital plan. But in this case, we want it would seem to me, to be the administrator's capital plan, which which the town council then endorses. And then the budget committee looks and says, I don't think we can afford this year, or we should move, we should, whatever deliberation the budget committee might put on it. And then that's presented to the people who say, all right, this is the administrator's plan, approved by the council, endorsed by the budget committee, or modified or recommended for whatever, and then we're gonna vote on it. And it seems to me that's the way to do capital work in the town.
Okay.
And that was in the council's mind, Bob, when you decided to go down this road with the town administrator, right? I mean, not that specifically, but that
Right.
general. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it would be helpful if we didn't have a special path that capital projects took that said, okay, we've convened for our year, this is the new fiscal year coming up. So we've convened, we're looking across the landscape, and we don't know anything about the town's, no offense to the budget committee, but we don't know what the town's capital needs are. So let's go ahead and put something together. See what we got. They still have that ability to look at what's developed, but it's developed by a person who's right on top of it, the administrator. And so it just seems to me to be the right way to consider it. And I don't, please don't let the fact that I've been doing this part of it for whatever number of years, I'm not trying to say, oh, hey, charter review, you should do this. It just seems to me this is an opportunity to do it.
Yeah.
Well, we definitely need that input because
Yeah.
of the whole, how it's unfolded. I'm not sure, but I know that's not familiar to me. So it's very helpful to know what would be the most.
Well, yeah, Carol can probably, as the person who served before me and back when we used to say, let's buy a fire truck next year, or let's buy a trash compactor next year. And we
Yes.
would put that in as a specific stroke in the budget, and the people would vote on that. And this involved a bit of adjustment on the part of the electorate, because now the electorate is asked, as they were this year, let's approve $250,000 for capital projects. Well, what are they? Well, here they are. This is what,
Yes.
but realize that if one falls off the table, like a trash compactor, because a fire truck is needed, we have the ability to do that. And so that's why the capital plan kind of became what it is.
I see.
Carol, and we'll ask Tony as well. Anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I think Bob is pretty straightforward. It's just areas that need looking at. And once you hear from us and the other department heads, how they function in these different roles, it'll give you a better idea as to what you might think would be a good fix for some of them.
And Tony, to you, you know a little bit about what goes on in Bristol, et cetera. Do you have a sense? Is this generally that plan? Is that basically the way other towns operate, to the best of your knowledge? That the administrator puts together the capital plan, the first pass, sort of weighs the pluses and the minuses, and then brings it to the council?
Right on target. That is correct. That's the way it's done. It's developed by the administrator, presented to the council for their review and approval. Then obviously, in Bristol, we don't have the budget committee. It goes straight out. The council really makes the final decision there. It's a little different. However, here I respect and understand the process, that it goes from the council to the budget committee, then obviously eventually out to the public, through the finance meeting, which is quite an interesting process. And I think, some of the things, as Bob pointed out, need to be tweaked. It doesn't have to be, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. But certainly there are some things that need to be tweaked right along. As Bob pointed out, some references to the treasurer, to the town administrator, in some instance may refer to town manager. So there needs to be some clarity throughout, and even tax assessor reference to the board of assessors. So, someone could take the charge of going through and just refine, make sure that the language is consistent throughout.
Okay, thank you. Any questions?
Jack.
Maybe? Yeah. Ed?
Yeah, one, if I may direct it to Carol, and I was prompted by your memo, Carol, to look through Rhode Island general laws. You suggested that Rhode Island general laws require that towns have a treasurer and tax collector. And in the course of my search, I didn't come across any requirement for that, but I did come across a requirement that towns elect treasurers and tax assessors. So I can't believe that we would have gotten this far into a charter without that language being vetted. But I wondered if you had a citation where Rhode Island general law specifically requires a tax assessor. It seems clear that the appointment of a finance director is permitted, but whether or not the finance director as a municipal officer can be interchangeable with a tax assessor or a town treasurer is another question.
I would have to look for that citation for you. I don't know it off the top of my head. I know that we have always gone on the premise that you are required to have a financial person. In our case, it was a tax collector and a treasurer, which now is known as a finance director who holds those roles. In terms of tax assessor, I know of no town that doesn't have an assessor. So I'd have to look in for the citation for that as well.
Yeah, sorry, it wasn't the kid, I can't find where it requires those positions, but what I can find is that it requires that those positions are elected positions rather than appointed. And that's what I can't believe, that we've gotten this far into a charter that would allow for the substitution of a finance director when state law wouldn't permit a finance director's appointment to be a substitution for a town treasurer.
I
But I
think,
can't find it.
right, I'll have to try and look for you, but I know when we discussed with the Secretary of State's office whether or not we could do away with that elected position, they had no problem with it at all. So I would have to, like I said, look for the citation.
Okay.
Is it, this may be obvious, but we now have a finance director. We could, I presume, by, charter or ordinance, go back to a treasurer and tax assessor?
And I don't think by ordinance, we'd have to go back to the voters, I think, again, because they were the ones who chose to remove it as no longer have an elected position. So we'd
Okay.
have to go back and ask them if they wanted to change that and go back to an elected position. I think it has to do with the fact that we have our own charter. And in our charter, we can dictate these management and government rights.
That's helpful, Carol, because it gets at the, as we go through the work on this charter, I'm saying, okay, did that happen, November 20th of 2020, because that was the elector's decision, in which case, we don't need to necessarily continue with this is what it was before, this is where it is now. It's not like it's flipping back and forth. A decision was made, we're moving forward. And so we just have to sort of capture that decision, make sure the language is correct.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Bob?
No,
Well, Bob, thank you very much. We appreciate how clearly you laid this out, and we'll certainly get at it. I more than welcome, obviously, to stay with us as we tear Carol's suggestions apart. But if you have to get on to your dinner or your evening, we won't be offended either. So please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll hang in here for a bit.
Well, thank you very much. And Carol, just, my thought is, as a committee, that we would divide up some of the homework and due diligence that each of the people that, the town officials that join us along the way to do the research and take the first crack at kind of drafting those potential changes, if there are any, and then bring it back to the next meeting. Is that kosher?
Oh, yes. Yeah, you can do that.
So Carol, I wonder if we could ask you, again, shared a very thorough and, run of a number of potential areas for review and adjustment. Wonder if you would mind taking us through it.
Sure. Preface to this is these are not what I think you must change, but areas that I think you must look at. As Bob mentioned, we no longer have an elected tax collector or treasurer. So anything that is in the charter that refers to that elected position, you might want to look at and see whether or not it's something that needs to stay with just changing a shall to a may, or whether it needs to be removed completely. But I just think it's areas that you need to take time to read and understand from the town officials what's happening now. And then that way you'd be able to figure out whether or not it needs to change or not. That's true of tax assessor because we no longer have the board of assessors. It's a single appointed tax assessor. And in the fact that that clause in the charter was activated, the prior board of assessors is now known as the tax assessor board of review, and they hear any review when people are appealing their tax assessments. So that section may or may not need some extra language to clarify that has been invoked. Section 710 speaks to the housing trust. And I know that the Housing Trust plans on talking to you about their own section, but I think that might need to be looked at.
I didn't understand that, Carol.
Well, the Housing Trust has their own bylaws, and they have been established as a nonprofit, separate from the town council itself, by governing documents that were required from our comprehensive plan affordable housing chapter. That trust, up until this point, hasn't had very much money coming in. The last 18 months or 2 years ago, the council voted to use what was going to be an increase in building permit fees to be set aside and put into a housing trust fund. They unfortunately, though, well, they can now because they just had something changed in town meeting, but prior to this past town meeting, they weren't able to even touch those funds without going back to a financial town meeting for permission. So now they have the ability, based on this past financial town meeting, to at least expend those funds if it relates to their mission. But they're still, hands are tied because it still says they're bound by section 103 of the charter, which is a requirement that anytime you're going to buy, sell, lease, grant, bargain, whatever, you must go back to a town meeting for specific approval unless you're the Agricultural Conservancy Trust. And they're separate because they have enabling legislation that set them up. So what I'm suggesting is that you consider whether or not it's a good idea to recommend that that section be changed, saying that they also would be exempt from having to go back to the financial town meeting before they could put a down payment on a house. It may or may not be a good idea. I just throw that out there because I know that their hands are tied. And it, in the market as it is all the time, really, if you want to make an offer on a house, number one, you have to have the down payment right there, and you have to have the authority to sign some sort of a purchase and sale. Well, if they can't get to the money and they can't prove that they've got authority to buy that house, then I would be a unique individual that would say, okay, well, I'll wait around until you have a financial town meeting and then I'll decide whether or not you're going to get my house. I may be asking for too much, but I just think that this is something that needs to be looked at.
Well, your description was very helpful. So at the recent financial town meeting, some of they were given the freedom to get at the money to spend it, but they have to come back to the financial town meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, right now they have the authority to spend the money. Let's just say you've got a house and you want to sell it to the housing trust for affordable housing. Right now, they can go to the town council and say, we've got this property we're interested in. They want, I'll just say $50,000 for a down payment. They go to the town council. The council agrees that this is a good idea to pursue this and gives them the authority, because that's in the article, to spend that 50,000. But in order to finish the deal, they still have to have a financial town meeting, and they still have to go to the voters, and they have to say to the voters, we put this $50,000 down as a down payment towards this property, and we want your blessing to finish the process and buy the home, which would probably include at this point that they would need to have some sort of financing authorized as well.
So a very cumbersome, lengthy process that,
Yeah, well, to have a town meeting, you probably need at minimum 45 days, probably 60 days would be better, because you have to have a certification of the voting roll and a few other pieces that you need to put in there. So, you're looking at almost 1.5, 2 months process before you can actually get before the voters and get that approval.
so say they had $400,000 in their coffers. They must, and now they come up with a plan to buy a piece of property. They must go to the town council for approval of that.
Well, they have to, for the approval of spending the funds. They still don't have the right to purchase the house or the property without going back to financial town meeting. And right now, they don't have that kind of money. They've only got about 100 and maybe 30,000 right now. So anything that they do, unless it happens to be a piece of land that is that value or less, they wouldn't have enough funds for anyways. They'd have to have some sort of financing mechanism that they'd have to reach out for.
Excuse me, can I ask you a question? Where do they get their money? Where do they get their funds?
A couple of years ago, the state of Rhode Island said that their building permit fees were going to be increased. And at that time, the fees that we collected were sufficient to cover the inspectors that we had and a few other things. So the council at that time thought, we're not missing this revenue, and the housing trust really needs the funds. Let's divert that extra into this building fund for the housing trust. And so in the last 18 months, almost 2 years, that's what's built that fund.
I see. Thank you.
Carol, and I was under the impression that the Housing Trust was enabling legislation. The Housing Trust was created by the town of Little Compton
Yes, under the
to satisfy a requirement of the state.
of our comprehensive plan. It is a requirement of the state, because each state, the state mandates you have to have a comprehensive plan. Within that, they also mandate you have to have an affordable housing chapter.
Right.
And part of that is a requirement that you have a housing trust. It's a bunch of dominoes, but it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And approximately when was the Housing Trust created?
I want to say 94. Am I wrong?
Oh, so
Wow.
before the chart, it
no.
predates the charter?
Hmm.
No,
No, I
it's been since I've been here, so it's later than 2004.
Okay.
We
Well-
established the house.
The first charter is
There might
95.
have been something called that.
Oh, that's probably where I'm getting the 94 in my head. Let me see if I can pull it up here. If you want to keep talking, I'll see if I can pull that.
So the first charter was 1995, is that correct?
Okay, so it didn't predate charter,
Okay, that's my question.
although Jane Cabot was still on the council when we had that chapter done.
Okay. So moving on to your second page. Carol, you got a section 204.
Okay, yeah, that's just something that bothers the Board of Canvassers. There's a section there that says, if I'm reading the right thing, I haven't got it from myself. Yep. That
gotta stay open.
when you're in person, you have to, after the meeting has adjourned, it says that the Board of Canvassers needs to keep that voting open for a half an hour after the adjournment. Well, a half an hour after adjournment, the only people that are standing there is the Board of Canvassers and the janitor. There is a requirement that when you come into town meeting that you're checked off on the voting list to make sure you're a voter. Then once you get into the gym, you're allowed to go over and vote for whoever's being voted that particular year, and then take your seat. Some choose to take their seat, and during the meeting, if they get bored, they get up and they vote and they go back. But someone would not be able to come after the meeting has been adjourned and vote separately for those elections, because you have to have been in the town meeting in order to vote for those two elected positions, because it's part of the warrant. So the Board of Canvassers has always said, if everyone who was in attendance for the meeting has already left, then there isn't anyone to come and vote within that half an hour. So I don't know what the proper language is. I threw something together that might be a suggestion, but something that says that the voting can be declared ended upon no further, I don't know, attendees for the town meeting or something.
Yeah, we'll certainly work on the language, and our take is we get this suggestion, and then we sort of put together a suggested thing if we decide to do that as the Charter Review Commission, and then go back. So, but you gave us a pretty good start, Carol. So in the town meeting, there's all sorts of budget lines that are addressed, and this past year you used the electronic hand raiser. Actually, that there is some language we'll probably have to clean up a bit on, what constitutes a paper ballot or a hand raiser, an elected vote. But the elections that you're talking about are at the financial town meeting. Are they budget and beach commission?
Yeah, those are the only two remaining positions that are voted at the financial town meeting. And they're also not under Title 17 of the general law. So they're not a true elected position in the same sense as I'm an elected position. They are considered elected because they're elected by the body, but they're not the same as Title 17 positions.
And because this gets into, all of this, the broader thing of, are people limiting hours, which is not what you're suggesting, I know, but the difference between your election or Bob's election to the council is that's a date certain where the entire town has the opportunity to vote. And the financial town meeting, all the registered voters can go to the meeting, but it's a subset of the form. Is that?
Well, it doesn't have to be a subset. I mean, the same people are afforded the same two events. If you're an elected, if you're a voter, you would go in any November election and elect for town council, school committee, treasurer, tax collector, not treasurer anymore, town clerk, the few bodies that we still have left. Those same electors are given the opportunity to go to financial town meeting. The difference is there's only maybe 5% or 8% of the electors that choose to do the financial town meeting. Much more of a larger percentage show up for the November elections. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Any questions, Carol?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a question. So regarding this rule of staying open 30 minutes after the polls, so you're saying in actual practice, this does not work. What was the thinking to keep it open 30 minutes if it does not benefit anybody? Did they
Well,
feel like it would?
I think what happened was when the Board of Canvassers first mentioned that they wanted to, because I can't remember if it was longer or not. I think it might have been longer. And there was a compromise. The charter review at that time said, we think 30 minutes is a good time frame, and we don't want to do away with it altogether. And then we came back a couple of years afterwards and said, it's still not working. We're still standing there with the janitor. And they didn't want to hear it at all. I think they felt like we were somehow disenfranchising the voters.
Okay, so even though in practice it has never worked, it has never had someone running in there it's never been when the meeting was adjourned. In practice, this 30 minutes has never worked, but 30 minutes is a compromise from maybe whatever it was in prior, maybe an hour.
The most that we've had, I would say, might be someone that's lingering around, and it might have been 15 minutes. Because if you've been at the town meetings, generally as soon as it's adjourned, everything starts breaking down and people start, milling around and talking and whatever. And I think maybe only once we've had somebody that was 10 or 15 minutes into it that said, oh my gosh, I forgot I need to vote. And they came running up and voted, but it really has not. We sit there and take down all of our ropes and just watch our clocks and wait till the 30 minutes stops and then we leave.
I see. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
So irregardless of the language, Carol, you're suggesting that, the Board of Canvassers would be there to make sure all the votes are cast. But at that point, when the meeting adjourns, if all of the votes have been collected, at that point, you somehow will work the language, but that would be the end of the time.
Yeah, I maybe even if you just said 15 minutes, the half an hour is just really too long. I can't stress upon you that it's the police officer who waits for us to leave for the night. It's the janitor who's waiting for us to leave so he can do his work. And then it's the Board of Canvassers and the two workers that I usually have back there just waiting.
So you're saying in practice over the years, it's just not necessary.
The length of time is not, no.
Right, I see.
No. Because like I said, once the meeting is technically adjourned, my checkers that are in the front that check you in to get into the town meeting, they're gone, they're done, their job is done because the meeting is adjourned. So there is no one else that can come in off the street and vote these ballots.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
And just to be clear, Carol, there's, as the moderator goes along, you vote on this item, vote on that item, and then you come to the elections. It's all part of the town meeting. Right?
Yes.
There's nothing that separates the budget committee from the appropriation for a certain. It's all part of that meeting. Right?
It is. It many years ago, when town meetings weren't governed by a charter, they actually called the names out in the meeting and you would have to vote yay or nay for the people that way. It's only since we had the charter and they designated that you needed to have a paper ballot, which is good because it certainly controls the voting much better. It's more accurate. We have no problem with that at all, but it is still part of the financial town meeting.
Okay, can I ask you a question? This past meeting via Zoom, so what happened after it was adjourned? Everyone just sort of stayed on Zoom for 30 minutes?
No, because of the pandemic that was waived.
Okay.
Yeah, because no one could have stayed on and voted again. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering how that possibly.
Yeah, and probably in the charter, I don't know if this is even necessary, but you could put something in there of, should another pandemic arise, voting by Zoom is allowed or something, but those are in your emergency declaration, so you probably don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions of Carol on her thoughtful suggestions?
I just have one thing to clarify. I thought that the tax assessor was elected. They're appointed. Denise is appointed.
Denise is appointed, yes, yes. The Board of Tax Assessors were elected,
Okay.
but then there was a charter change.
Okay.
And that changed from the single or the 3-member elected board to a single appointed person.
Okay.
Okay. So any other questions for Carol?
No,
Okay. Tony, we didn't, and I'd ask that if you have suggestions for the charter review, which I'm sure you do and will, that you send them to us as a committee, and that's at the, what is it, Carol? Charter review at littlecomptonri.org. I'll send it to you.
I'll look.
Yeah, but Tony, do you have some suggested areas while you're here? I'm sure you do, or that you'd like to get to us on?
I will get to you. I think it'll be easier if I put something in writing. I apologize. I didn't realize you wanted something right up front, but I will make sure that I do get. There's a few suggestions that I have. I mean, what Bob and Carol already touched on, I think very important, changes or possible changes, I should say, that reflect more the practice sometimes than the current practice, or improve, the approach. But I certainly would be glad, as we're talking, actually, some things have come to mind that I did not think about initially, but now, with listening to Carol and Bob, certainly things have popped up a little bit, and I will put a short draft of some things to the Charter Commission.
Okay, great, thank you. Because we're going to be with, the finance functions, the police department, all of those departments that you're going to be involved with. So anything that you want us to be thinking about as we have those subsequent meetings would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think,
Jack, can I give you that email address?
yes.
Okay, it's
Oh,
LC Charter Review at littlecomptonri.org. And it looks like 2005 is when the Little Compton Housing Trust Board was created.
Oh, wow.
So Carol, so as sort of a next step, this is really for everybody. My thought is, and Carol helped me with the email addresses, and I sent to the committee all of the different commissions in town to send to the chair of those various committees, organizations, what have you, the note this week, basically asking them for any suggestions, saying we're, getting at this, and over the next year will be, or possibly a little less, but to tee up any suggestions, be it the housing trust or whatever, and then we'll funnel them into the, into the meeting schedule. Carol, I was thinking that I would ask a couple of our committee members tonight, maybe Ed to take on Bob Mushin's suggestion, and Monica to take on yours, and to begin the process of just sort of thinking it through, doing the research, framing it, and then sharing, obviously, with the committee, their thoughts and draft, and asking for help or partnering. And then we'd come back at our next open meeting to kind of review that. Can we share anything in between now and then, or?
No sharing in between.
No sharing, no collaborating. Forget it, you public sector people, sorry.
Carol, to clarify, if we produce drafts, and Jack distributes drafts to the committee members and doesn't allow for any comment on the drafts, just provides them to the committee so that we have them in advance of the meeting, that would seem as though it's perfectly in line with the open meetings.
That can be done. You just, nobody can talk about it. You can't receive them and then call up Michelle and say, I can't believe what they just suggested.
Yes, but I think if it were all done through the chair, it might be easier to manage perhaps if that were
Well, it's just
acceptable.
like the suggestions from Bob and Carol today. We got those ahead of time. It would just be the same, I would
Yeah.
think.
But you can have them. You just can't talk, you can't talk business amongst yourselves outside of a meeting. That's been posted.
I remember one of the former review chairs saying you do your business at the meeting, but Ed, that's an excellent thought because it's very helpful in deference to everybody's time that you can do your, reading and those of you that may have escaped an assignment at this meeting, your good fortune will only last so long. So, so everybody will take on pieces of this as we go forward. But I think that would be great because then, within, whatever period of time, say, a week before or a few days before the next meeting, if we could just see the draft and see the questions and, and then we can take them up as key items at the next meeting. And that's because I think when we look at the Paul Golembeski and the police chief and that may not be much of an agenda item at all. So we'll have time to work these through, but being prepared, I think, would be great. Ed, Monica, is that acceptable for you guys to take a start on those things? And
Sure. Can you be specific what you'd like me to do?
well, Carol had laid out these items, some of them, actually, the last one we didn't even touch upon, but the one on the Board of Assessors and the financial town meeting suggests, do we think we should make an adjustment? That's something we'll come to a decision on at the I don't see us waiting till the end of this process to revisit all these things. I think we will make if we think 15 minutes is a simple solution as opposed to a half an hour.
Yes, I'll take that one on. Is that what you want me to do? I'll take on the one that Carol was reading about on this, if that's what you're saying, right?
I'm saying that she sent us, a 2-page note.
Yeah, I have that. Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's
Yeah.
it.
Regarding section 204. Yes.
Yeah. There was one, that something's changed from elected to appointed. That's happened. That didn't seem. And then there's one final thing, Carol, on the Rhode Island state appropriations level 5 to 10. That's pretty straightforward too, right?
Yeah, it's just, that's been a change on a state level for quite a long time, and we've just never changed our charter, and that's fine. We may not want to change our charter. Maybe we want to keep our levels lower, but
yeah,
it's something to ponder.
Okay. Well, I appreciate, Carol, the way you framed it because it helped us get our heads around it. And Tony and Bob, thank you very much for your thing. I guess the only other item on the agenda is sort of public input. There may be
You have no one here. Just us.
just us kids. Any other items to come before the committee? Any other suggestions on anybody's part?
Carol, I do have a question. So it has been suggested that we possibly look at other towns regarding their reviews. If we are looking at other towns, we can read their review, but in the same sense, we cannot discuss it with them. Is that correct? Other towns.
You can do your own research and read other
And-
charters, and you can talk to other towns. You just
Okay.
can't talk amongst your
Amongst
own,
yourself.
yourselves, your
Yep,
board
okay.
members.
Okay,
Because it becomes a rolling quorum. You may choose to talk to Phil, and then Phil chooses to talk to Michael, and
right.
before you know it, you've got a quorum.
So we can talk to other towns regarding something we're essentially researching.
Yep. And,
Okay.
and I've made a note for myself to try and send you the links, because municipal affairs and League of Cities and Towns and a few other state offices, Secretary of State's office, I think, have links for you to look at those other cities and towns, home rule charters.
Oh, beautiful.
So
Great.
you could kind of go to one place and look at everything, and then you need to keep in mind that, a charter that might be in place for, I don't know, I'll say Cranston, I have no idea whether they have a charter, but a bigger city or town could be very different than what Little Compton would need. So yes, you want to look at these, but you want to keep an open mind as to whether you're looking at something that's similar in size to Little Compton and
Right,
Mayville,
right.
or
right.
whether,
Like we wouldn't look at Providence's charter essentially because it's a whole
well, it
different,
wouldn't make much sense, but you could.
right, right. No,
But on
more
the
like
other hand, they could be
Exeter or
doing
something
something
like
that
that.
would be very
right, right.
useful. You don't know.
Right, makes sense. Okay,
I
thank
was
you.
just gonna ask actually that same question. Is Exeter about the same size as?
Yes, roughly.
Exeter,
The
Situate,
town that's
little bit.
closest to us in size is Foster.
Foster, yep.
It's about 4,000, 4,500 people. But yeah, Exeter, all of those they're governed the same way as well. And that they
Right.
have a council that's, in some cases, there's a town administrators, we have other cases not. And you're
Well,
certainly welcome to talk to any of us. Any one of you, Monica and I can have a detailed conversation about my opinion about this event. It's just that we
Oh.
can't convene 3 or 4 other members and have kind of an offline meeting of half the Charter
Oh.
Review Commission.
Yes, I see. Okay, yep.
And I would
I
encourage
was-
you to do that.
Yeah.
Anybody that's on the inside is able to give you some answers to how do we do it? They can answer that question.
Right, I see. Thank you.
And if I may, I certainly can be available to anyone, if you wish to drop in and just have a conversation, certainly feel free to do so. Just
Thank
let me
you.
know in advance to make sure I can block the time,
Sure.
Is
So,
the
Bob-
town hall open?
please.
Is the town hall open?
Yes, it is. As of today, we have one door open. Yes, the ramp door is open and you certainly may come in. We encourage you to use your mask, but that's perfectly okay if you don't. Hopefully you've been vaccinated.
Thank you.
Let me just, Bob, Foster, Exeter, any other, Situate, did somebody say?
Well,
Hopkinton or
Situate's in
Gloucester.
But another town that has great similarities in terms of its needs is Jamestown.
I was
It
gonna
doesn't
say
have a high
Jamestown, yep.
school.
Yeah.
And
It
Block
has,
Island
it's a
also.
waterfront place. Yeah, New Shoreham is a good example, but they're a little tough to, you can make a field trip there, I suppose.
It's a business trip, Bob. It's a business trip. We got to do
It's a
it.
good time of year.
So those are a similar size, and I guess Jamestown would be good given the particulars in terms of the
Yeah.
issues.
Great.
Is there one you admire? Is there like a best practice town here that you yourself would or no? I'm not
Fiscally
saying would-
conservative or
I love my
Responsible.
adopted town that I happened to move to a number of years ago, and I put it in first place. No, I'll give you that answer, Jack. I don't, take a look at what might be,
And the list, the ranking of towns by size is available online for all towns in Rhode Island.
Okay.
Very good.
We've been together a little over an hour. I thank you all for your town. Our next meeting's the 21st of June, 6:30. The plan is to invite, Councilman Paul Golembeski and Police Chief, obviously Carol and Tony and Bob, you are always welcome, but we will certainly let you live your life. We thank you all for your thoughts and ideas. And can I have a motion to adjourn? Nobody wants to adjourn?
I will move that we adjourn.
Attaboy, Ed.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All very much. Have a
Good night.
great
Thank
Thanks so much, everybody. That's great.
Good night.